inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. Everyone, business and labor leaders, local politicians, and the President of the United States all want American communities to develop more jobs, especially more manufacturing jobs. President Trump has used a great show of his ability to use the bully pulpit of the White House to shame Carrier, air conditioning, Ford Motors, pipeline manufacturers to make new investments inside the United States. Governors and mayors, other politicians talk of tax breaks and subsidies to attract new businesses to their communities. But that's only one part of the work that goes into creating opportunities for new manufacturing investments in America and in certain communities. Much of the nitty-gritty work that makes deals that bring new companies and jobs rarely gets coverage. This morning we're going to focus on the efforts to reindustrialize in Cincinnati and Hamilton County, especially through the work of the Port of Greater Cincinnati Development Authority and its collaboration with the City of Cincinnati. I'm joined this morning by Laura Brunner, the President and CEO of the Port of Greater Cincinnati Development Authority, which is a long word that usually gets shortened to the Port Authority, since 2011. Before joining the Port, Ms. Brunner had a long career in real estate development. She made her mark as someone committed to expanding minority opportunity in the field, including engineering a majority ownership of the offices of the Vernon Manor by African American investors. Oscar Bedolla became the director of the Department of Community and Economic Development for the City of Cincinnati in 2014. He supervises a staff of 75 who oversees all the downtown and neighborhood economic development. Prior to his current appointment, Mr. Bedolla served as Vice President of KPMG Corporate Finance in New York City and as a portfolio manager for the U.S. Department of Transportation. Laura, welcome back to Newsmakers. Oscar, welcome.
Thank
and
you.
Welcome to Cincinnati. And I'm glad to have you on the show for the first time. Laura, I know that the Port has a lot of different areas of focus, but one of the most important is this area of industrial reinvestment and revitalization. How does that fit into your total scope of work?
Well, we have three major things we're working on. One of them is to grow our public finance practice, which primarily supports the private sector. And then the other two parts of our business are reinvigorating, redeveloping neighborhoods and revitalizing industrial opportunities by redeveloping, reclaiming 500 acres of our industrial land for the specific attraction of manufacturers. I think both of those go very well together because in both cases what we're really doing is supporting the rebirth and growth of our middle class.
And in terms of your geographic scope, the Port is responsible for all of Hamilton County, right?
Correct.
And not just the City of Cincinnati,
Correct.
but City of Cincinnati being a major.
Right. Yes, and certainly our industrial land starts right at the basin of the Ohio River and follows up the Mill Creek.
Right.
You know, there's a very high concentration of our best land inside the city of Cincinnati.
That whole historic and over through the Norwood Trough
Yes.
has been absolutely critical historically. And Oscar, from your perspective at the city, how does this industrial revitalization, this reindustrialization, how does this fit into your goals in the department?
Yeah, no, applaud Laura and her team. I think a good strategy based on data, it makes for better informed decisions. And so I think Laura's leadership and the plan that they put together will put us in a good position for the future. So I think it's a long-term strategy and something that we should be thinking about.
Yeah, these things don't just happen quickly. In terms of, as I looked at this recent report that was done and can be found on your website, and we'll let people know how to find it, that was done by Deloitte and sponsored by your organization and others. This is not just a Cincinnati thing. This reindustrialization, revitalization of manufacturing is happening all over the country. And as you talk to your counterparts, Oscar, around the country, how do we fit into that? Where do we stand in terms of being able to do this?
Yeah, no, agreed. So I think as we have conversations across the country, especially in the Rust Belt and the Midwest, everyone's thinking about how do we continue to perpetuate growth, right? How do we stay competitive in a global society? And strategies like this are exactly what keeps us competitive, right? Looking at opportunities, activating real estate, bringing things back on the tax rolls, and creating tax value to grow the local economy. You do that by bringing people to the city and then growing jobs, right? And so I think this strategy speaks to both of those two things.
Well, we were very excited to learn from our Deloitte study that not only is manufacturing growing in the United States, it's growing in urban settings. There are manufacturers, just like there are office workers, just like GE Service Center wanted to locate in an urban core because of all the amenities. Manufacturers also want to be close to the urban core for their access to the all the amenities the city has for their employees. They also recognize increasingly now that that's where the workforce is. The workforce is closer to the urban core than it is out in the green fields. And there are actually companies that are prioritizing, because of their core values, the reuse of real estate, that want brownfields, which is obviously music to my ears.
So you were talking about greenfields and brownfields.
Correct.
What's a brownfield?
A brownfield is generally contaminated real estate. If it's industrial real estate, it's been used in the past, and just about any use, if you go back over the last couple hundred years, probably has some degree of contamination. So you have to reuse a brownfield by first cleaning it up.
Okay.
And greenfield generally refers to land that has not had any purpose other than farmland in the past.
Okay.
Right. And Dan, if I could jump in there, I think, and that's what makes urban development so challenging, right? And so there's also a premium associated with having to do work in the city, because you have to pay for the environmental cleanup and a number of other things associated with getting these sites ready so that we can bring jobs to them.
So there's been a cost to getting back to the point where you can redevelop, even though in the past, when that was in use, it was a contributor to the society. There is a moment where it has to be dealt with.
Right. That we need to have a big paradigm shift that involves demolition of old buildings that are obsolete and the cleanup of the ground. And there's no question, it costs a lot. Our role, really sitting in between the government and the private sector, is to raise the money that's necessary to make that investment so that we can sell the property back into the private sector at market rates.
Right.
The manufacturer isn't going to pay for the cleanup. They want to pay the same thing that they would pay for land someplace else. So the public sector really has to absorb that. And their motivation for doing it is that it will be long-term return in property values and income tax values.
And I would say that there's implications here that the more jobs that are located closer to the center of the population core, the more it deals with the question of transportation for workers. And one of the things that in the last few weeks we've talked about on this show is the whole question of a SORTA levy, a need to reorganize, expand SORTA's effectiveness, and this all plays in. If you build everything out beyond the Beltway, you've got a whole different transportation situation.
Agreed. So as you mentioned prior, I worked for the Department of Transportation, and working with states and cities, those cities that understand that there's a revenue associated with creating these large infrastructure projects that act as a catalyst is really the solution. And so whether it's Brent Spence helping to activate that and provide better access to the west side, I think would create great opportunities in the same footprint in the projects that Laura's looking at.
Before we talk about some of the sites, I want to ask some questions about some buildings. There's older manufacturing buildings all over our region, especially in that Mill Creek Valley that we were talking about before. One of them, for example, would be the Lunkenheimer building complex over in South Fairmount. And anybody who drives across the Western Hills Viaduct, there it is, right on the west side. It's a large building. And another one would be the Crosley building that a lot of people see as they drive I-75 because it's very close. It's in Camp Washington along Spring Grove Avenue, or Old Coleraine actually, technically. So what about those kinds of old buildings? Can they be reclaimed for industrial purposes, not just turning them into condos or apartments?
We've just started a conversation connecting into the maker manufacturer community here. We will continue to explore that, and over the next few months. We're trying to determine, we're going to make a field trip to Indianapolis, where they've done a good job of incubating small manufacturers and having shared space.
Which is what we're talking about with the maker.
Yes, exactly. So I think there is a potential for that, and I honestly agree with you. I think Camp Washington is a great place for it. You have to get the right size building. Lunkenheimer is so big. I mean,
it's huge.
We've talked about that with the city. I mean, that's enormous. So I would say that's probably longer term. That would be the longer term strategy versus the short term. But yes, we always want to evaluate the reuse of buildings versus assuming that they have to be demolished. We want to balance the need for larger sites. What we have learned from our other partner, Ready, as they look at the project inquiries that they get from around the world, that modern advanced manufacturing typically needs 20, 40, 50 acre sites. So we're very actively looking for those larger sites at the same time that we recognize that sometimes it's going to be cost prohibitive to, if it takes, if you have 8 buildings that have to be demolished in order to get to 20 acres, that probably is beyond comprehension. So in that case, we want to look to see how many of those buildings can be reused.
Another term that's just been thrown in, you guys live in this world of your own jargon, your own terminology,
right.
The maker economy, but also advanced manufacturing. What's meant by that?
Yeah, well, I think Laura's probably a better expert on this than me. But I think at the end of the day, manufacturing has changed over the years, right? And advanced manufacturing for me is a cleaner and more efficient way to look at how you bring products to market.
I think the way Darren Bulow, our consultant from Deloitte, described it last week, which I really liked, is we need to be making things that make things. So it's making the equipment that is then going to make the product,
right,
rather than the old manufacturing where the humans were interacting with the product that they're making. So it's just removing it another layer.
So we're talking about automation.
Yes.
That's right.
But we're also, in terms of history, and Laura would know that's part of my background, is the whole machine tool industry. The machine tool industry was creating machines that made other machines. And so there is a tradition here of that.
You would love this part of the statistic, because it does tie back to your story about how we developed that history here with the steamships. We still have a high percentage of those employees and those skills here in Cincinnati, higher than the national average. And that's one of the things that makes it more likely that we can succeed in attracting advanced manufacturers in the future, is that we currently have high-skilled engineers and technicians in those areas. We still have 14% of our employees in the county are employed in manufacturing. It was 43% of our employees in 1969. So it's declined.
Which isn't that long ago.
Not that long ago. So it's declined significantly, but the national average now is 10%. So we are significantly ahead of that to have 14%. So we are positioned well to win in this kind of new wave of manufacturing relocations.
Okay. Let's talk about a couple sites. One is, I think, that a lot of people would know would be the Cincinnati Gardens. And everybody we have a little video of some footage of the gardens itself. But it's not just that building. There's property there too, right?
There's 19 acres, and it's very well situated. We're all disappointed that it's no longer successful as an entertainment venue. Everyone enjoyed it, whether you're a sports enthusiast or or the circus, or going to rock concerts there. It's had a great life. But what we are in the business to do is repurpose and put properties back to their highest and best use. So when you look at that location and look at the surrounding properties near it, it is ideally positioned for light to advanced manufacturing.
So what's happening there right now? What's happening on that site?
Right now we're working on the bid specifications to put the bid out for the demolition. That will be our next step.
Now that isn't a particularly dirty site, though.
No,
Brownfield.
no, we don't. No, there'll be asbestos in the building.
There'll be there's asbestos everywhere.
Right.
Okay.
Right, but you're right. It did not have. It wasn't a printer. Didn't have a dry cleaners on it. So those are some of the uses that are.
Yeah, really pose problems.
Yes, right.
Another site, not that far away actually, is on Section Road, the old Gibson greeting card.
Yes.
And your organization supplied us some drone footage, which is fun, of this site. So what are we talking about here?
So that's a 56-acre parcel. At one time, Gibson employed 900 people there, both at their headquarters and a manufacturing facility. It produced $1 million a year in income tax for Amberley Village. When we bought it, the most recent tenant had 20 part-time employees there.
Jeez.
And the parking lot was full of Goodwill trucks that were leasing the space. So it definitely devolved significantly over the years. There's a 600,000 square foot building, and then in the back was still wooded. So it's about a $4.5 million, $4 to $5.5 million project to do the demolition, the site work. We have to change the wastewater treatment system, and in order to market that again. We rezoned the front, so now we're going to have the largest parcel in Hamilton County that's available.
So that's 56 acres?
56 acres.
So that would be the largest in Hamilton County?
Yes.
So that should be pretty attractive.
We've already had people look at it, and actually one of the things interesting, it was definitely reassuring that their expression was, we want urban. They were very interested in the proximity to Roselawn, which is literally 2 blocks down the street,
right,
for the amenities that community has, as well as the workforce.
So this is technically outside the city of Cincinnati and not in your purview, but it's very close and will affect a lot of residents of the city of Cincinnati.
A lot of the things that are going on in the market affect the overall economy. That's the great thing about being a regional economy.
Right.
So exactly right.
Yeah, we have to think regionally. We can't just think.
Yes, exactly. Amberley Village has very few employees. A very small population, but it's very, very close to Roselawn and Bonteau.
Okay, I have to take a short break.
Okay.
Stay right there.
Okay.
Stay tuned. After the break, Laura and Oscar will return to explore more about the local efforts to reindustrialize the region and some creative collaborations which have social as well as economic benefits. Welcome back. I'm joined this morning by Laura Brunner, the CEO of the Port of Cincinnati Development Authority, and Oscar Bedolla, the Director of the Cincinnati Department of Community and Economic Development. We've been talking about bringing industry back. One of the industries that's inside the city that I love, and we've featured on this show any number of times, is Nehemiah Manufacturing. And my understanding is, Oscar, this is more through the city than it is through the port. Tell me a little bit about why you're working with Nehemiah, and then we'll talk about what's about to happen with them.
Yeah, sure. Well, one of our goals is to retain companies as they grow, right? And so this is a great story about how we're retaining Nehemiah within the city limits. So they're looking to expand their operations. As you know, they help to manufacture products for P&G.
Right.
They serve an underserved population, and so the employees have criminal backgrounds and have abused alcohol and drug abuse. So we think, again, advocating for everyone in the city and creating opportunities. So this really speaks to that story. And so we're excited. So they're going to be relocating to Metro West on a portion of land that we've been marketing, which speaks to Laura's strategy of retaining and keeping companies in the city limits that are in the line of manufacturing.
So this is a company, I want to be clear, this is a for-profit company,
right,
but it has a commitment to hire returning citizens, people who have criminal records or other issues or hard to hire, give them, employ them, give them a track record, which they may take to other businesses, or they may stay with Nehemiah. And I think there's about 76 employees now.
That's right.
They're hoping to grow because their business is growing.
That's exactly right? So they're expected to grow another 50 jobs. And I should note that this has not been finalized by council yet, or still working through the details, but hopeful that it'll be approved.
And this site, you call it Metro West.
That's right.
I think most of it would know it as Queen City Barrel.
That's exactly right.
And Queen City Barrel was one of those sites that really required a lot of going back in and cleaning up what was there.
And I'm excited about that particular relocation, that company going to that spot, because I believe that we want to use and leverage the assets that we have, and that particular location has very good water and very good wastewater connections because of its location. Yeah. And Nehemiah actually, in their manufacturing process, has water as an ingredient and has wastewater, a high amount of wastewater use. So it's very well suited to that location. And so I'm really happy that it's that business that's going there, and that's part of this kind of resolve to make sure we're not putting distribution companies, we're not putting service businesses on this industrial land that has such great
because it's that
potential.
intensive utility.
Yes.
You're talking about wastewater in this particular
and
case.
sometimes it could be electric, and sometimes it's access to the rail.
Which, if those are built out in greenfields, all of that stuff has to be brought in.
Right.
It isn't there yet, so it's
Right.
new investment. Here, we're not abandoning it; we're just reusing it.
That's exactly right.
And there's a lot of sites like that
There are.
inside the city, right?
And what's great about this site, just to drive this home, is it's in a part of town where it hasn't seen as much investment as other neighborhoods, and so
Yes.
we love that piece
That's
too,
to
right?
put it gently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Right. So, and Laura Price Hill, strategic assets and social infrastructure as well with Euler, and so we're starting to see some, housing starting to pop up around that, and so we're excited about the future of Price Hill and
We've
Lower
got
Price Hill.
a partnership there too with Euler, looking to get homes to them that they can use for homesteading to sell to parents. Of
Well,
the
it's Euler, and then
students.
Community Matters and
Right.
Education Matters, which
Right.
is right next door. There's some real vitality in Lower Price Hill if we can then get some jobs
Right.
into that community.
That's exactly right. And we're hoping that, again, as we continue to mark the site, we'll be releasing an RFP in the spring for the remaining portion of that land. We have an initiative to do a public process, and so we're hoping we get some good traction with that.
One of the sites, I'm literally just asking this off the top of my head because I drive past it every day when I drive in and out of town. I love coming in and out of town on Spring Grove
I do
Avenue.
too.
I mean, it's just reading the history of the city. But the old Cons plant, which there's been a lot of dirt moved around on that plant. I don't know, do you have any relationship? Does the port have any relationship to that site?
The port did manage the grant from the state for the cleanup of that site, and we're working collaboratively with the owners and the county on expanding the footprint of it.
So how much acreage is there?
17.
17. So it's in private hands.
It's in private hands.
So they have to find somebody who wants to
They have a
develop.
development services agreement with the county, so there's a close relationship there. And in our partnership with the county, we're also working with the property owner.
Now, as I would look at a site like that in the valley, in the Mill Creek Valley, probably the utilities are very good.
Yes.
The sewer system is very strong in that part of the area, in the electric access, transportation access is all good. Those things look like all the factors are there,
Right.
but it's the old site.
Right.
So is that something you have to get people over?
I think there is a little bit of branding to it, and there's also, I think, the more activity we have going on near it at the same time, the better. So it's not just one new building in the midst of a lot of disinvestment. And I do believe we need to be patient. That the big we should be patient with that site also to make sure we're getting a manufacturer there that's going to capitalize on all the infrastructure that you mentioned.
That's right. And Dan, if I can add to that, I think you're right. All the key pieces are there. Some of them need additional investment. And I think if you take the MLK site, for instance, in Uptown, you have the infrastructure in place for roads, but as you clean sites, you need to put in new infrastructure. So there needs to be additional investment. So I just want to make sure we get both sides of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's not just everything is there.
Right.
You just have to clear the surface.
Right.
But I do want to be clear here as we talk about advanced manufacturing. Manufacturing is still very strong in the United States in terms of output. But we're not talking about bringing back the old style factories with the thousands and thousands of jobs in the same way that we used to think about
the
it.
density will be smaller, no question. But it's still the highest number of, there's still a lot of other positive factors. Every manufacturing job creates 1.6 other jobs because of the supply chain. And 50% of manufacturing jobs on average are attainable without a college education. So that's what I mentioned earlier, it fits into the building of the middle class so well. And manufacturing jobs pay well, they're full-time, they have benefits, so they're family supporting jobs. So even though there are fewer of them, their impact is very significant.
Oscar, I'm just about out of time, but you've been here since 2014.
That's right.
What's your attitude going forward about our possibilities?
Oh, endless. We are definitely on an upswing, and I think we have the right stakeholders, all of us are firing on all cylinders, and so I think our future is bright.
Okay, that's good to hear, and it's thank you very much for the work you're doing. And if you want to learn more about what the Port Authority or the City of Cincinnati's Community and Economic Development Departments are doing, check out their websites, www.cincinnatiport.org or choosecincinnati.org. Love that. Thank you for making Newsmakers part of your Sunday morning. Next week, we will talk about transforming America's trade relations. I will be joined by the new Executive Director of the Cincinnati European American Chamber of Commerce. Have a good week.
Thank you, Dan.
Stay right.